Well, good evening, everyone. Darren Saul here, your host of Saul Searching, the Saul Recruitment Podcast, episode 32. I have a very special show and a very special guest all the way from Ireland. Donal, how are you?
Excellent, Darren. Really good. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. Thank you for coming on the show. Now, everybody out there, we're going to be chatting about the fact that speeches and presentations should be performed, not delivered. All of us, to some degree or other, are in sales. You might be trying to sell the kids on the idea of going to bed, or trying to sell your widget to a client, or trying to sell your service, or trying to sell the idea that you are worth voting for in an election. It doesn't matter. If you are trying to get others to do something, you're in sales. Selling is simply a transfer of belief. To transfer that belief, you have to be able to communicate well. So my guest today, Donal O'Neill, has over 30 years in the entertainment industry. He's gone from being afraid of his own voice on a PA system to being a performer who loves talking to a large audience. Now he coaches others in how to engage, educate, and to some degree entertain when they are speaking to an audience. He believes that a presentation should be performed, not delivered. So welcome again, Donal.
Thank you. I think you've covered everything, Darren. That'll do us all the best.
That'll do. We'll just press stop there and we're done.
Yeah.
But once again, thanks again for doing this. Really appreciate it. And I love the topic because I think, we're all speaking and we're becoming, we're putting ourselves in front of an audience, whether it's face-to-face or Zoom, and we have to become master communicators. And It's really the time now when people have to step up and learn how to transfer their message. And what you do is so important because it's not just about, repeating something verbatim. It's a performance.
Absolutely.
And you really have to engage people.
Yeah. I mean, it's like your audience here.
Yep.
I mean, we have to be interesting to them, otherwise they're going to switch off. It's as simple as that. So you have to be able to engage them and take them on a journey with you. And that's really what it is. If you're presenting to somebody, as you rightly say, it's not a question of reading something out. You might as well put it in an envelope and post it to them or send them an email. If you're actually asking people to sit and listen to you either on a screen or come to a proper venue and listen to you, you have to engage them. And honestly, you have to entertain them.
100%. And I think that goes with content in general now, because it's such a noisy market. Everybody's, putting out content. It has to be educational, but it also has to be entertaining, which is kind of what we're going to be chatting about today as well. But maybe before we get into it, I'd love to hear your story. Let's give the audience a little bit of your background as to how you ended up in this field and why you do what you do.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned earlier, years and years ago, I wouldn't have spoken on a microphone. And that wasn't that unusual because I worked in the entertainment business, but I worked in what I would call the background end of it. I was, first of all, I was an agent, and then I became a manager and then a promoter. And what I found, and as I say, it wasn't a surprise, was that the people who supply the PA systems and the lighting systems and all that sort of thing, they are more than happy to do the best possible job they can for the people who are on the stage, but don't ask them to either go on stage or speak in the microphone. I remember going into a guy one time on the PA and said, would you make an announcement? Car registration number such and such has left their lights on. And he went, no, I'm not speaking in the microphone. You do it. I'm thinking this guy owns a PA company, and I didn't want to do it. It was as bad as that. So that's where I started from. People as a rule hate the sound of their own voice through a PA, especially the first time they hear it. And if I'm coaching somebody now who has a live presentation to do somewhere, one of the things I do, I say, right, let's go and get a room or a hall somewhere. I'll bring a PA system. We'll set it up. You take a microphone and listen to yourself. So I don't want you being shocked the first time you hear your voice. And I've done that to great effect with people because I know what they expect. They look in their face, and the first thing they do, they talk into the mic, and as soon as they hear a noise, they pull the mic away. And they can't hear any more noise, Right. So because they hit what they hear, because they're just not used to it. Nobody's used to hearing themselves. We talk and we hear ourselves inside our head, and that is not how it sounds out there. Yeah. So when you hear yourself through a microphone, suddenly for the first time in your life, probably you're hearing what you really sound like out there.
Yeah.
And it feels alien because you've been listening to this other sound all your life up to that point. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's one of the things we do. So in my case, what happened was I love music. That's why I end up in the entertainment business. And I'm a frustrated musician because I can't play. I would love to be a musician, but I can't. I've never had the discipline to apply myself long enough. I mean, the number of times I set out to learn to play guitar, yeah, and I still can't play guitar.
Did you ever try to play the guitar?
I've tried it, but I've never had it. It's probably pure discipline and practice, I suppose, would be the thing. Yeah. So as I say, I love it. And I had got into the entertainment business. I got to the promotion stage. And there was a guy who, unfortunately, he's dead now, but he had a brilliant life. He lived way into his 80s, a guy called Delaney. He was massive in the UK, probably in the late 50s, early 60s, probably just up to and including the start of the Beatles time. Okay. It would have been his real heyday. The Beatles probably killed him in many ways. Right. And what he was he was a drummer, but he was no ordinary drummer. He was an amazing drummer, yeah. Wow. And he had, he ended up actually with a really big band, but that's another story. He had this band, which were a bit like a typical sort of dance band, Glenn Miller type thing. Maybe not quite as big as that, but Eric was a showman, fantastic showman. And he was a guy, when I first met him, which would have been back in the 80s, he was 65. And he was still trading a bit on his past, but a lot of people hadn't a clue who he was. But that stage, younger people, who'd been brought up in the Beatles and the Stones and the whole Deep Purple thing and all that. Yeah. So I brought him in to do a tour in Ireland because I'd been told by this guy that I respected a lot, Eric is a first-class entertainer.
Great.
And the first night we brought him in, and this just shows you exactly where I was at. There's a little sort of a hick town in the middle of Nowheresville in Northern Ireland called Castlederg. I've just offended anybody from Castlederg, but the first night was a Saturday night, and we had Eric booked into the Castlederg, and he arrived in with a band. It was called Eric Delaney's Little Big Band. There was only 5 of them, and Eric, and they arrived in the van. I was there to meet them, and they opened the van and they started carrying all this kit in, and I was like, how on earth? First, I thought the van was a TARDIS. There was that much in it. How did they get so much into it? And they got all this stuff. The reason there was so much kit, he had 36 percussion instruments on the stage, right? Insane. Including 3 kettle drums and just a massive kit. God. Yeah. And the other 4 guys were squeezed onto the floor because they couldn't get on the stage. Right? Wow. You had a keyboard player and you had a guitar player and a bass player and so on. So anyway, Eric and I sat down. When he did a sound check, and it was really good. The sound was brilliant. I thought, wow, this guy is good. He's really good, Yeah. So we sat down and we started talking. We spent a couple of hours talking, and the doors opened and people started coming in, and we got a good crowd. I think they were there just because they never heard of this guy. I want to see what he was like, And such things didn't come to Castlederg, So it came to the point where he was due to go on stage. And he said, right, are you going to go and introduce me? And I said, what, are you mad? Are you talking on a microphone? No way, not doing that, no way. And he laughed. He said, come on. And I said, no, not doing it. Honestly, couldn't do it, So he went on, he introduced himself.
Oh, my God.
I didn't do it. And the band played, and to cut a long story short, they were magnificent. He was magnificent. And they entertained the place royally for the whole evening. I think he got 3 or 4 encores at the end of the night. They didn't want to let him go home. He was such a performer, you see. Wow. So that was great. I was well impressed. The following night, we had him in Belfast, the capital of Northern Ireland. And the reason we had him in there, it was a Sunday night, and most of the musicians in Belfast aren't working on a Sunday, right? And I figured that they would know who Eric was, and most of them did. So these guys, we did a great business. We filled the place up, mostly with musos,
Nice.
Because they wanted to see the great Eric Delaney. Now, most of those guys knew me as well as an agent, stroke promoter, and entertainment agents rank somewhere below estate agents and insurance salesmen in the entertainment world.
Second-hand car salesman.
Absolutely. Oh, they're way up there compared to us. Yeah. Because musos really they really don't like giving you their 10%, you know.
Yep.
The figure you don't do any work for it. So anyway, this place is full of musos, real mostly heads, you know, and it's getting to the point where Eric's going to go on, and I'm starting to get a real guilt trip, you know, because I knew how good this guy. I witnessed him the night before. He was fantastic, and I thought, you know, somebody has to introduce this fella. It's not right to let a man so good go into the front of this audience and not be announced.
Yep.
And I found myself walking to the stage. The band had already got on stage. Such is the design of the venue. The band actually were on the stage. So I threaded my way through the audience and got up onto the stage. And Eric looked at me, you know, because he was sitting behind the drums, you know, like, what are you doing here, you know? And I sort of mouthed to him, I'm going to introduce you, you know? And he sort of smiled, he laughed. And I took it as a benevolent laugh. God, was I wrong? Yeah. So bear in mind, this guy's a drummer, right? His timing is perfect, right? Yep. So I grabbed the microphone because I'd seen Mick Jagger do that, and that's what you had to do, grab the microphone, you know? And just as I was about to say, ladies and gentlemen, I got the "l" out, right? Oh, no. And he hit the snare drum, a massive whack bang. And I jumped about 2 foot in the air, and the whole room fell about laughing, right?
Oh, that's brilliant.
And I looked around, he was doubled up over the drum kit. The rest of the band were laughing. Everybody was killing themselves laughing at the idiot on the stage, which was me.
Yep.
And I do remember actually thinking, it can never get any worse than this. Yep. Never, ever.
It can only get better from here.
I can't remember what I said, but in psychology, they call that flooding, you know, exposing you to your greatest fear, you know. Yep. So there I was on a stage full of people who knew me, making a complete muppet of myself, you know, and that was it. So that probably cured my fear of getting on a stage. It didn't teach me how to do it. It didn't teach me how to speak, but at least I wasn't worried about standing up in front of an audience anymore. So that was the beginning, you know. Nice. And then over the years, I had lots of other mostly disastrous experiences that taught me how to do things correctly, you know, over the years, until I got to the stage where I ended up on stage doing hypnotic shows and stuff like that, which, you know, an hour and a half, 2 hours, and loving it. You know? So
hypnotic shows.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're a hypnotist as well.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Donal, you do everything. Unbelievable.
Another story.
Wow, we'll have to get you back on to talk about that.
Oh, certainly.
But I mean, that's fascinating because, you know, there's a lot of people out there, including myself, before I even started podcasting or doing anything with content, you know, I was also scared of talking to a mic. I didn't know how am I going to sound, what am I going to say. You know, I'm not really that much of an extrovert anyway, really. But, you know, it just comes with practice, and the more you do it, the better you get, and the more fun you have. And I think that's the key as well. You just relax into it and you just enjoy the process.
That is it. And it really, in fact, to be honest with you, it's a bit of a drug, because once you start to enjoy it, you quit. Yeah, I mean, I actually love being on stage now, you know, especially if you get a good responsive audience, you know, people who react to you. That's the one thing I miss about being on. We're still in lockdown in Ireland here at the moment. And I really miss a live audience, you know, because, you know, podcasting is great, or even if you're on a Zoom call with maybe 20 other faces, but you don't get the same feedback from the 20 people as you would in an audience.
So true. There's an energy you feel from live that you don't feel any other way.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. But I mean, let's get into the actual content of this, because it's so relevant for people these days, particularly when they're doing presentations on Zoom, because it's just as important. But everybody always has a million opinions when it comes to presentations. Some people say, oh, I've just got to wing it, make a couple of points and wing it. Some people say, I'm going to prepare it verbatim. Why are there so many opinions, do you think?
Probably, well, there's a lot of people have done a lot of, have written books about it, have done recordings about it and all the rest of it. And probably, if you look at them, there's not that many opinions of people who are doing it properly. Those are two extremes that you've mentioned, right? You have what I call the winger, right? And the winger will come along and say, oh, I just want to wing it. I don't want to lose my spontaneity, you know, or spontaneity. Believe me, the most spontaneous people are the best rehearsed. You know, always go and rehearse your spontaneity. You know, 100%. The greatest speakers have rehearsed their spontaneity. The problem with winging it is that anything can happen. Absolutely anything can happen, be it a live situation or a Zoom situation. You know, your internet can go down, whatever, you know. And if you are winging it, you have to deal with that, and you have to think, "Oh, where was I? What was I doing?" It breaks your continuity completely. Similarly, if you are someone who has rehearsed it verbatim, that's even worse,
Yeah, because
because
if you lose your place, oh my God, you
if
freak
you
out.
lose your place, you're completely
Yeah,
lost. You're
yeah.
screwed. You're trying to remember what sentence was I on?
Oh, yeah,
Wait, no way. And that's when you get people completely drying up, and then it's panicsful because they've never been in that situation before, and the audience is cringing. Because the thing about it is, one thing you have to bear in mind if you're speaking in front of an audience, your audience want you to succeed. It's not a comedy club. They're not there to heckle you. They actually want you to
Yeah,
succeed. If
yeah.
you can make them laugh, that's even better, like a comedy
Right.
club. But they because yourself, if you're sitting watching someone who, be they a speaker or a player or whatever, and they're really struggling, you're starting to cringe in the audience. You're feeling for them, and
Yeah,
it's making you feel very, very uncomfortable.
that's
So
right.
your audience wants you to succeed. So
Definitely.
that's another reason not to learn it verbatim, because if you get lost, then it's cringeville for everybody.
And I love
So
when you said, a lot of the most successful acts seem spontaneous, but the spontaneity has been rehearsed. And the more you listen to somebody that speaks a lot, you'll hear the same joke or the same something slip in all the time at different, at the right time. And that person's thought of that, and it just brings it in whenever he or she needs to.
it's one of those things that the more confident you get, you will have little instances that happen, right?
Mm, mm.
And your unconscious is very good at providing you with something. And once it does that, and that has worked, it then gets filed in your conscious for the next time.
Oh, gotcha.
So the next time that happens, you actually have it there on file. Oh yes, and you bring it out, and it
Gotcha.
works.
Gotcha.
The process is infinitely quicker than that, but
Yes.
that's where it works.
And that's a really good point, is if you can get to the point where you can be relaxed and let your subconscious take over, that's when you can really start to enjoy it, because your conscious mind is what's holding you back.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, your unconscious mind is trying to help you succeed. As long as you haven't spent your whole life telling your unconscious mind that you're useless. So many people do.
True. True.
If you tell your conscious mind, yeah, I'm good at this, it will
Yep.
make you good at this.
Exactly.
That's definitely true.
Okay.
The other thing is that people are really terrified of what happens if.
Yeah.
Well, there's a simple solution to what happens if the if happens. The first thing you do is you acknowledge it.
Yeah. Yep.
If you're in an audience, if somebody drops a tray of glasses down the road, don't keep speaking as if it didn't happen, because
Yeah.
everybody knows it has happened.
That's
Most of
right.
your audience are looking around to see who made the noise.
That's right.
So you acknowledge it, but you say something, not something nasty. You either say something funny, or you say "oops" or something. Just to acknowledge that it has happened. And then carry on. I heard a story. I didn't witness this myself, but I heard it from a reliable source, shall we say, and it involved a person who had achieved a great allocate in the speaking world, had won a competition, right?
Yeah.
And apparently, so I'm told, he was asked to come along and give his talk to a large audience, and it involved baking a cake or something
Right.
while he was doing this, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And apparently he cracked the eggs, but somehow the eggs got all over his trousers, right?
No.
And rather than acknowledge the fact that he got egg all down his trousers, he tried to continue with the whole thing as if it hadn't happened.
All the eggs were just flying down.
Yeah. So the audience were looking at it. All they're focusing on is the egg in his trousers. They're not listening to what he's saying. And it was a farce,
Yeah.
And he should have turned around and said something about the fact he covered himself in egg yolk, and then carried on. The audience would have loved him for it if
Exactly.
he'd done that.
And that's when you lose credibility and trust, in a way, if you don't acknowledge it.
Yeah, definitely. You always need to be you need the audience on your side, and the way to do that is to be on their side. Yeah.
I like that. So true. So when it comes to preparing, for your presentation, what are some of the things that you can tell people? What should they be doing apart from bringing a tray of eggs?
Probably the single most important thing, it's the thing that people don't do, is you need to rehearse. You really need to rehearse. Now that's down the line a bit after you've constructed what it is you're going to say.
Yep.
So if I go back a wee bit, a presentation journey, you know, you're going to start from point A.
Yep.
At the end of it, you want to get to point Z for the sake of argument, or Z. I don't know what you say in Australia. Is it Z or Z in Australia?
Z. I think we say Z. Yeah.
You're the same as us, right? You want to get to point Z, and you have a whole lot of other points on your journey along the way. So that's how you construct the talk in your mind that way, you know. So you know where you're going to start, you know where you're going to finish, and you know different points that you want to get to. Most people would say, and I would agree with this, you know, work out your finish at the very start. Work out what you want, how you want to finish up. You know, that will help you construct the other points along the way.
Yeah.
So you know that in your head. If you want to, you could have bullet points somewhere of where those stop off points are, but that's as far as it goes. Each one of those bullet points should trigger something in your head that allows you to elaborate on it, you know, naturally. So that's where the bit about not doing anything verbatim comes across, because you know you want to talk about point C, you know, and you have a whole lot of stuff you can say about that. You can talk about it, no problem.
That's right.
And the thing about it is, you get a lot of speakers will come on and they'll say, you know, somebody will ask them a question, and they'll say, I'll answer questions at the end. Well, the problem with that is, by the time you get to the end, the person who's asking the question has been confused since point C. So they've lost interest in what you were saying. Can't be bothered even asking you the question because it doesn't matter anymore. They've more or less missed the rest of the talk, you know. So if you have these points that you know you're going to get to, and somebody asks you a question, you can take the time out and explain it in such a way that you're involving the rest of the audience. And then, you know, I'm on point C, I'm now heading to point D, and you know you can carry on your talk fluently. Right? It allows you to take those interruptions and deal with them at the time. You know, now, okay, I know there's a reasonable argument for saying, well, if you get too many questions, it slows the whole thing down. But you can control that. You know, you can control that and say, well, that question's similar to that one. We'll cover that together, and so on. You know, so so you work out your start, you work out your finish, and you get these points along the way, and then once you've done that, you rehearse. And you rehearse and you rehearse and you rehearse. And one of the great things about rehearsing, you rehearse out loud. You don't rehearse it in your head.
I like that.
Because as we've already mentioned earlier on, what you sound like in there is different from what you sound in reality. Definitely. So, you know, people see me in my car and they think, oh, he's on the phone. I'm not. I'm talking to myself. You know, 25 years ago, before mobile phones, I just thought he was mad. He's just talking to himself. You know?
Or he's just singing to the radio.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you can rehearse anywhere, you know. And I mean, if you really want to know what you sound like, you can record yourself on your mobile phone these days. There's no problem doing that. Definitely. Or you can record yourself on Zoom and play it back. Yeah.
Easily.
But one of the things I've found that when you rehearse it out loud and do it a number of times, first of all, you find out the words that you trip over. You know, the words that you can say in your head quietly, but when you try to say them properly, your tongue gets tied and you trip over them and it sounds stupid, you know. So you discover those things. So then you work out a better way to say them.
Yep.
And also your unconscious really comes to the fore, and it comes up with wee things that you hadn't thought of when you're doing it out loud. And you can either jot them down or you can just use them the next time you do it. You know, I would find that before I would do a presentation, I will have done that presentation at least 20 times. At least 20 times to myself, you know, out loud, you know. And okay, it's time consuming, but you want to do it right for your audience. You want to give them something good. They're going to take their time out to come and listen to you. You put the work in beforehand.
It makes a difference. And the other thing I find that helps me is actually to stand up while I'm rehearsing rather than sitting down, because I try and simulate the environment and the energy that I will have when I'm performing whatever it is I'm doing.
Definitely. I have to say, that's the big difference I've found with Zoom compared to everything else, you know, because, you know, the computer's on the desk. You know, if I stand up, you're going to be looking at my nose, you know. So I'm seated. I've got used now to speaking from a seat. I still move about a lot, as people have told me, but definitely if I'm doing something to an audience from a stage, I will rehearse it standing up every time, you know, because it's different, you know, and you get your full body movement. And it works far better, and the energy's there. You know, it puts you in the zone.
It's all about that energy and being in the zone, so your subconscious mind can recall that and deliver.
Yeah,
when you need to.
absolutely. Yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah.
It really is how it works. And it's fun.
Yeah, it is fun.
Yeah. And it
So we
means
have
you
a soundproof room.
or else understanding neighbors or whatever,
Yeah.
or family or what. Yeah. But the other thing about it is, it also means, see, when you go on to give that talk for the first time on stage, it's not the first time. You've
That's
already
true.
done it 20 times.
Exactly. Because your
You're
mind doesn't know
confident
the
to go
difference.
about it. Yeah. It's their first time. It's the audience's first time,
That's
but
right.
it's not your first time. So that
Yep.
just breeds confidence.
Yep. So true. I love it. And what
Yeah.
about like PowerPoint and slides and, versus projector versus nothing? There's always that argument. How do people deliver speeches? What are they going to use?
Okay. If you're talking about a live situation, yes, PowerPoint's fine
Yep.
and slides, but bear in mind, they're called visual aids for a reason. They're there to aid the speaker. The speaker's not there to aid them.
Yep.
The worst thing you can do is to have a PowerPoint slide with far too much information on it.
Yep.
For one of the reasons is the person at the back of the room can't see it because the writing's too small.
Yep.
You want to have really a single point per slide, and that is only there for you to trigger you, to give you something to talk about.
Gotcha.
So and you never ever read a PowerPoint out loud, because the people can read faster than you can speak. And they've got to the end before you have,
Yep.
and they're sitting wondering, waiting for you to finish,
Yeah.
and thinking, what's taking them so long? They're starting to look at their phone, and they're losing interest. So never read out what's on the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint is only to give you a push about what to talk about. And if you can, pictures are far better than words, because you can talk so much about a picture. I mean, I gave a talk recently about this, about PowerPoint and using slides and what to use and what not to use. And I had a picture of was it a transit van? It may well have been a van, right? And this van had passed me on the road going the other way about 2 or 3 weeks before I give the talk. Right. I just caught a glimpse of it out of the corner of my eye. And luckily I had a friend with me, and we identified the van. It was a company called Discount Beds. In Belfast, you see. So I got onto social media and said, can anybody tell me or get me a photograph of this van, Discount Beds? And it was amazing. The response I got was great.
Wow, fantastic.
I ended up tracing down the van, tracing the guy that owned the van.
Oh my God.
Once I had assured them that the van hadn't done anything wrong, I just wanted a picture of it. And the reason I wanted a picture of it was the main sign writing on the van was Discount Beds. But then, as a wee sort of after effect, towards the back of the van, they listed beds, mattresses, occasional furniture, right? So this triggered my weird mind as it is, and I began to think to myself, and I used this in the talk, here we have a transit van, Discount Beds, great company, give them a wee bit of a plug, they deliver beds all over the UK, blah, 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 blah. And they do mattresses and bedding, and they do occasional furniture.
Occasional furniture.
Yeah, and I wondered what was occasional furniture. I thought, if you walk into their showroom, and the man, the salesman goes up and says, "Sir, would you be interested in this item over here? It's a sofa. Occasionally, the rest of the time, it's a garden gnome." Here we have, here we have a table over here. The rest of the time, it's a driveway. Occasionally, and I ended up getting quite a while out of that, and got a lot of laughs out of it, which gets people going. But it made the point that this single one picture of a van, an ordinary van, allowed you to talk so much and get your point across.
Yeah.
So that pictures are brilliant. Pictures really. If you ever watch any of Seth Golden's stuff,
he's really good at that
all the time. He's magnificent, and he gets his stuff gets laughs.
Yeah. And
unfortunately, I can't remember the name of the guy, but there is a guy who said this, that the best point of learning is straight after the laugh. Right. So if you have something you want to get across, you want people to take on board, make them laugh, then make your point, that will go in.
Love it. I love that. That's why sometimes when people stand up to do a speech, they make a little joke at the beginning, and then they've kind of made their audience receptive. They've woken them up. It's like, okay, now we're listening to you. You have our attention.
Exactly. Whenever you start, your first time you walk on the stage, you have to grab your audience straight away. You have to grab them. So what you see people doing is, it's the worst thing you can do. first of all, I'll go back another stage, right? Go back at one stage, just before you get on stage, somebody is going to introduce you, right? Rule number one, write the introduction for them.
Nice.
Don't rely on them to introduce you and say what you want them to say.
Like you did for me, which was good.
If you're at a conference, this poor person who's emceeing the conference, right? They're maybe having to introduce 30 people over a weekend, right? They don't have time to research what everybody does, So they're going to look up your webpage, pick 2 or 3 things out of it, and that's what they're going to put together.
And bland.
It could be the most rubbish thing. It could be nothing to do with what you wanted to talk about. So write your introduction for them, give it to them and say, that's what I want you to say, please. They will be glad to do that. Absolutely. It makes their life easy. And always do it in such a way as, this is Darren Saul, or sorry, this next man, this person, your next guest, has been in recruitment for 20 years. He's a professional photographer. He loves surfing. Please welcome Darren Saul. The last thing they say is, please welcome Darren Saul. And that's when you walk onto the stage, right?
Beautiful.
Now, the first thing you say is not, thank you very much. It's great to be here. Screw that. You don't do that. You come out with whatever it is you're going to grab them with, Gotcha. And 9 times out of 10, it can be a rhetorical question, It can be something like, how many of you think speakers don't rehearse or don't research their audience properly? I'll go, huh? And then you repeat the question, because there's a number of people in the room who haven't actually been listening to you, but they've heard the inflection in your voice. That was a question. What did he say? So you say it again, and you've got them as well.
Nice.
And then you can carry on. So you've got your whole audience, and or else some people do it like the one saying something controversial and everybody goes, what? But it's a way to get them. Or you can say something funny. The other thing to do is, if you are in a situation where there have been other speakers before you, listen to what they've been saying. If something has got a great reaction from the audience, go on and reference it. Work it into your introduction. Say something that that they've laughed about in the previous speaker. You get them laughing and you're away.
Beautiful. Absolutely. And that's kind of where the entertainment and the performance part comes into this, is that you have to think about how you are performing and how you are grabbing people's attention. It's not just delivering a message. You have to deliver it in a way where you'll get the most reception and people will really accept what you have to say because you're entertaining.
Yeah. The problem is that most of the people who are asked to speak because they're an expert in some field. Mm-hmm. If it's a conference and say it's a conference about IT, they're an IT expert. Maybe they're an IT or expert in security or something like that. Yeah. So they make the mistake of thinking, oh, people want me to come and talk here because I am an expert in this. Yes, they do, but you still have to grab your audience. Absolutely. So not only do you have to be an expert in what you're about to talk about, you have to be a bit of an entertainer as well. Now people say, I'm not an entertainer. I don't tell jokes. Fair enough. But by entertaining, I mean engaging. You have to be able to engage your audience. Unfortunately, and I'm not trying to offend anybody here, but probably the IT people are the worst, because they spend their whole lives looking into a wee screen as opposed to out in a big audience, and they because they're used to doing that, and because they are experts in their field, they do have quite often have a real difficult time communicating to a broad audience, but it can be learned. It's not something that you can't ever do. You can learn how to do it.
Yeah. And the language is important as well. If you're working with very esoteric language, you got to be careful not to use that to communicate when you're doing a presentation, because most people don't even know what you're talking about.
Oh, the number of people who talk in acronyms, and initialisms, and I'm going, I'm just starting to glaze over because I have no idea what it's a different language, And the people who work in their specific field understand what they're talking about. Yep. But the rest of the people are going, what? So
true. Well, I'd love to get into that a bit more. Do you have any particular tips or tricks for people to think about in terms of how they are performing or how they are engaging attention? Do you have any little toolkit to say you could either be funny, you could either be physically entertaining? What are the different ways people can really grab people's attention?
Some people, being physically entertaining is probably a bit more difficult. there are certain guys, James Veitch, I don't know if you know him or not.
No.
He's a great guy. He does a lot of TED Talks and whatnot. His main thing is he loves to reply to people who are the scam emailers, you know, and he winds them up, you know.
Yeah.
Look him up on YouTube. He's very, very funny. He sends them back replies, and he eventually gets them telling them, please stop emailing me. You know, they tell him to stop emailing them. But one of the things about him is he has some beautiful facial expressions, you know, that he puts across, and they complement what he's doing. They're not the main feature, but they complement it very well. But that's unique to him, you know, and not everybody has that. There's a couple of things. One of the most powerful things you can use in any presentation, because it's something we're wired into, it's called the power of three, right? Okay. Human beings are wired to look for patterns, right? Nice. And the smallest pattern you can get is 3, right? So the power of 3 is a great thing. Comedians use the power of 3 very well. What they do is they will give you point A, point B, and the last point, when you're expecting C, you get D, and that's where they get the laugh from, you know? So they go A, B, D, which is still a pattern, but it's actually a pattern break.
So right? They're breaking pattern. That's why it's funny.
Pattern. And that can be used for humor, you know? And comedians do it all the time. But if you're not necessarily looking for the humor, ABC is perfect. To deliver your main points in 3s if you can do it, you know, or you're maybe you're delivering a main point, but give 3 attributes of it, you know, to emphasize the main point, because we are wired to look for patterns. So use that a lot. And you can even do it in the overall talk is, you know, point A is your start, the middle is point B, and point C is your end. So it's still a 3, and you can have a sort of a circular ending. Whenever you get to the end, if you can refer back to point A, that closes the whole thing nicely.
Closes the loop. I like it.
Yeah. And people are happy. They feel that good, we've got to.
It feels resolved. It feels whole.
It's one of the reasons why another tip is you never ever take questions at the end. Never.
Because it breaks pattern.
Really. Well, if you haven't been dealing with the questions along the way, and sometimes even if you are dealing with questions along the way, it is nice to say, has anybody been any general questions? But you don't do that at the end. You do that before you get to the end, right? Nice. So say you know how you're going to finish. You've got your ultimate conclusion, right? What you say is you get to maybe 10 minutes before that, say, right, in 10 minutes, I'm going to conclude. But before we get there, has anybody any questions? Right? I like that. Now, the reason for that is they may have no questions, in which case you just go and conclude. They may have questions which would take you away off on a tangent, which you can do because you know you're going to come back to where you want to be to conclude. Or they may have, you know, silly questions or whatever, you know, and you can deal with them. But the bottom line is you're in control because you're still going to finish your presentation the way you planned to finish it.
Nice.
If you leave your questions, if you finish your presentation and say, right, are there any questions? You don't know what anybody's going to say. They can say anything and completely destroy the impact that you've had.
That's right. It's almost like you've just lost momentum because you finished off on a high note, and then and people ask questions, and then the whole thing just drops.
Correct. You're handing over control to the audience. You don't ever want to do that. You know, so never have your questions at the end. Have them before the end, and tell people you're going to give them X time for questions if they need it.
I've never heard anybody say that before. That's fantastic. I love that.
Yeah.
I'm going to use that. Great.
It just keeps you in control.
Awesome.
So it's another tip.
Yeah, beautiful. The more the merrier. And so I'd love to hear more about what you do, Donal. So tell us how you work with people and, you know, in what capacity, and you're working for people all over the world.
Yeah. Well, basically, obviously, the great thing about Zoom is it has completely opened up the world. Yeah, in a big way. In my life, it certainly has. Because prior to the whole lockdown thing in Zoom, I am based in Northern Ireland, and that was where I was looking at my market. So I was putting on seminars, come along, listen, and then anybody wants to go on to do a further course, we can do that over a period of time. Well, first of all, that was all knocked on the head with the coronavirus thing, but it is now gone on to Zoom, and it has evolved in a number of different ways. There's people have come to me saying, look, I have a presentation I have to do in 3 or 4 weeks. Can you work with me?
Nice.
And we'll sort it out. And the answer is yes. And the great thing about it is I can do it all over the world, anywhere. You can do it in Sydney, you can do it in Canada, whatever, and so I've actually more clients overseas now than what I have here. It's really bizarre. Another thing I was asked to do, which was very interesting, I wasn't expecting it, and it has been fun, is a company who are based in Belfast, but they do sell into the UK and the Republic of Ireland. And they asked me to sit in almost like a secret shopper while two of their salespeople were doing telling people about their products. Nice. So they had a number of customers or potential customers there. I was there as a sort of a potential customer, but not really, listening to the whole presentation. It was two ladies, who were really, really good. They knew their stuff really well. The only problem I found was that they were both Belfast girls, and Belfast people tend to talk far too quickly, right? They tend to have peculiar accents if you're not from Belfast. Yep. And their audience were largely not from Belfast. Mm-hmm. So there was a difficulty there. I thought people probably weren't getting the full impact of their knowledge. They obviously knew their product really, really well. They were two very personable people. They were very likable, which is important. But I thought they were missing out. They needed to slow down, and they needed to be get their enunciation just a little bit better, So I was able to write a report and go back to the company and say, this is what I think, So that's another thing I can do for people as well.
That's a really good point, because a lot of people, when they're starting out presenting, they tend to speak very fast because they're a bit more nervous or whatever else. And I've had to do the same with myself. It's kind of just train myself to slow down and pronunciate or enunciate everything properly. And it also gives you a second to just take stock. So your speech, your speed in which you speak is very important as well.
I have that, I can give you categorical evidence of that. I have timed myself delivering a talk to myself, right? Rehearsing, and maybe a speech that I've got down. The biggest bit is people think, oh, I'll never be able to talk for 10 minutes. Yeah. Trust me, once you get in there, the trouble is getting it cut down to 10 minutes. So I told you getting the chainsaw out to the top, cutting the bits off, and these are bits that you love, but you still have to dump them, and you never have to dump 2 or 3 words, because that 2 or 3 words are referring to something else. So you have to dump the whole thing.
That's right. It's horrible.
So I've got to talk down to maybe 10 minutes. And I'm thinking, I'm squeezing it in there, but I'll get it done in 10 minutes.
Yep.
When you deliver that talk, you get it through in 8.5 minutes, because you do things quicker. The nerves take over and you are going quicker. And really, that's not a good thing. You should be able to slow down and do it.
And you almost find that you sometimes think to yourself that the audience is wanting you to get to roll through things, but they're actually not.
No, they're not.
They're just captivated and they're enjoying it. But you think, they want me to get to the next point, so I'm going to speak faster. But no, just slow down, take your time, and as you say before, bring them on the journey with you.
Absolutely. The only time you want to be short is that if you're at a conference and you're given the slot before lunch, and the organizers say, we want you to talk for 40 minutes, work it out in your head. You're going to have the talk's going to be 30 minutes and finish under 30 minutes. Nobody's going to complain. They're going to say, that was great. Now we're going to eat and talk about it. And away they go.
So true.
The hardest part, after the worst slot to get is the one straight after lunch, because straight after lunch, people are sitting down, they're relaxing, and they're starting to get sleepy. I have seen people asleep after lunch, and that's where you really have to be on top form. You have to grab them at the start, and if you can, that's when I would say start with something physical. Right. Do a physical exercise with people. I want everybody to stand up and come up with some idea, some routine. You pick it up, loads of them on YouTube, and get people to physically move, and then they can sit down and listen to you, because that wakens them up. If you don't do that, guarantee some of them are going to fall asleep. Even if you're the most engaging speaker in the world, the warm tummy and the warm feeling takes over, and the eyes droop, and away they go.
I've seen that a few times, and it also kind of breaks pattern in a good way. They're in the pattern of falling asleep, and you just wake up, break pattern. Okay, where are we? Now you have my attention. Let's go.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. So you have to do that on that slot after lunch. That's a must.
That's a really good point. Yeah, this is gold, Donal, gold. Now I want to chat one last thing about storytelling. Storytelling is important as well.
Yep.
We all know how important that is these days, and that word's been done to death. But people love to really get into a story and really feel part of the situation. So I thought maybe you can tell us a story and give us a little bit of an idea of how you might have helped somebody, on their journey to being a better presenter, and how working with you really made a difference to them, without mentioning names, of course.
Right. You're right about storytelling. Everybody's using this word storytelling as if it was something new.
Yes, it's been around since the beginning of time.
Thousands of years old.
Yeah.
It's thousands of years old. I mean, before when there was nobody writing things down, that's how history was. It was handed down by storytellers,
100%.
shamans, whatever.
Yep.
And the storytellers were probably the most important people in society.
Definitely.
They were the people who handed down the knowledge over the years. So storytelling is not new. And once again, it's a bit like patterns. We're wired as babies to listen to stories. I mean, every child wants a bedtime story. Daddy, tell me a bedtime story, and so on. They go, and not only that, they want the same bedtime story again and again. Remember the time the kids they read, and the parents are getting bored because they've read it hundreds of times. The kids still want it again. So we love stories. We want to hear stories, and people will. I mean, it amazes me. People ask comedians, would you tell the one about such and such? They've heard it before, but they want to hear the comedian tell it again, because it's a good story. So, if you can make your presentation in a story format, brilliant. That's to me, the examples. It's like me telling you about Eric Delaney earlier on. That's me telling you a story about how I get over my initial fear of getting. I could have said, I went on stage in front of an audience and the guy made a fool of me. And that got over my fear. That's not the same about telling you about Eric and his drums.
Very different impacts. I mean, I still remember the details of that story now, and you've done that all through this podcast, which is sensational. Perfect example of storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, I said to you earlier on about stories about that taught me. That did teach me how to not to be scared about getting in front of an audience. Didn't teach me how to do it.
Yeah.
And the way I learned that lesson was another incident, all to do with the entertainment business, where way back in the 90s, early 90s, myself and another guy became the first two promoters to bring a male review into Ireland, right?
All right.
Male strippers, basically, right?
All right.
And we had these guys.
Oh, I thought you said a meal review. You said a male review.
No, a male. Sorry,
not a meal review. Like, how was your hamburger?
Right.
Okay, great.
At the time, the Chippendales were starting to become really well known. But we got hold of this bunch of guys who were great, and they were called the Men of America, right? And there were these big hunks of beefcake type characters came in, and they were very good. And we sold out 15 nights. It had never been done in Ireland, so the women were just going mad for it. It was brilliant. It was the easiest sell we've ever had, right? Sold out completely. And bear in mind, this is pre-mobile phone times, right? So they had their MD, well, the director of the whole thing, was a wee guy. He was small. He was about 5'8", but he was built really well. His name was Billy, and he came from the Bronx in New York, and he was as tough as nails, right? And he was their spokesperson, So the first night they went on, it was brilliant. It was a magic night. The atmosphere in the room was just fantastic. The women were brilliant. But what these guys did, they weren't that hard to pay, right? So they weren't earning lots of money. But as I say, this is pre-mobile phones day. So what they were doing at the end of the show, after they'd got all these women enthralled, they had Polaroid cameras, right? And what they were doing, the women could pose with the hunk of their choice, and somebody would take a Polaroid picture and sell it to them for $5. Nice. Now, this is a long time ago. $5 was a lot of money.
Right? They put them cleaned up.
Selling 200 or 300 of these on a night, maybe more. I mean, that was their main source of income.
Wow.
Which is why we weren't having to pay them too much. And the guys were really good. They were great guys, good to get on with. But the Irish women weren't stupid, right? They came to these gigs and they brought their cameras with them.
Oh, no.
So they were taking pictures all through the
terrible.
And Billy started to go nuts, And he came to me the second night and he said, Donal, you have to stop these women taking photographs. And I'm thinking, how the hell am I going to do that?
Leave your cameras at the door.
You're not allowed to do it. They can't take photographs, You've got to tell them not to, So I thought, okay. and I didn't think it through. So that night, room full of women, 750 in this case. It was a place near Portrush in Northern Ireland. And he said, right, you got to go and make an announcement. They can't take pictures, you know. So innocent Donal, no brains at all, walks into the audience. It was funny. The stage went out into the room. And as I was walking over the stage, I've never had my ass pinched so often in my life until I got to the stage. As soon as I stepped on stage, the place went nuts. I mean, these were a bunch of women who were expecting somebody to come on stage and take their clothes off. This man had just walked on stage. So they're all going, yeah! You know? I was thinking, oh dear, right? So I walked over to the microphone and they were still screaming. And I started to make my announcement, you know, ladies, you're not allowed to take photographs, blah, 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 blah. And they completely ignored me. You know, I might as well have been talking to the wall.
Maybe you should have taken your shirt off. They might have started listening.
I wouldn't have got off the stage alive. But so it was a total failure, right? Obviously, the show went on. The women still kept taking photographs, and Billy was even more annoyed. You know, at the end of the show, right? He was really pissed. So, I thought he was giving me so much earache. I thought the next night I have to do something here. What am I going to do? So what I did was I got a sheet of paper, right, and I scribbled some stuff onto it.
Yeah.
And I learned from what had happened the night before. So when I went up on the stage and I knew everybody was going to go, ah, so I just let them go. And I stood at the microphone and I stood there with a piece of paper and I waited until it all subsided, right? And I knew that as soon as I would say the word ladies, they'd all go nuts again. So I went, ladies, and they all went, ah, right? So I let it subside again because of the night before.
That's great.
I said, ladies, I have a message for you from the men of America. I want to read it to you. Is that okay?
Love it.
And they all went, ah. I said, right. And I started reading this piece of paper where this wasn't written on it at all, but it looked like it was. And I said, ladies and gentlemen, the men of America would like to respectfully request that when they're doing their show, you refrain from flashing. And they all laughed and tee-heed. And I sort of looked very confused. And then went, oh, sorry, from flashing your cameras as it puts them off their stroke. You know? And I got a big laugh.
Well done.
And believe it or not, they didn't take as many photographs that night, you know. Brilliant. And the point of the story is that, you know, because I'd learned from the night before, in other words, that's the rehearsal bit. Yep. That's where you learn your mistakes.
Definitely.
I knew what to expect. I knew how they were going to react. I knew what I had to do to communicate with them. I couldn't talk at them. I had to get them on my side, you know. And it worked, you know, and there was less photographs taken. And Billy saw me making the effort. He saw the reaction. And he stopped giving me earache, you know. So that's another story. That's how I learned about the benefit of rehearsing and doing your homework and knowing what your audience are like.
That's sensational. That's what a great story. What a great story. I love it. You've given me so many great stories to remember today.
There's lots of. That's my point. You know, you'd asked me how I got to where I got to. In 2018, I decided that I had come from the person who was scared of his own voice to somebody who enjoyed being on stage. And I thought, you know, there's a lot of coaches out there, a lot of people teaching public speaking, but there's nobody has had the journey that I have had with the disasters and the humorous things and whatnot that each one of those things has taught me something that I've learned. And it's taught me something that I can impart to other people with the same stories, you know. So I figured nobody will have a course like mine. It's unique.
No way at all.
It's got to be enjoyable. It has to be entertaining. You know?
Definitely. I mean, Donal, it's been absolutely sensational. My jaw's hurting from smiling and grinning so much. I've been laughing for the last hour. It's just brilliant. So entertaining. So I really want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. But before we finish up, I'd like you to tell everybody how they can find you.
Right. If you look up, the best way to find me is on Facebook, or not Facebook, sorry, LinkedIn. Look up Donal O'Neill on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is universal now. There's no two ways about it. And most of my connections would be through LinkedIn. I do have an email, which there's another story behind that, but it might sound a bit weird. It's Donal, which is my name, which isn't so weird. At Mulsanne. Mulsanne is a little village in France, Mulsanne.
Right.
It's also the name of what used to be the longest motor racing straight in the Le Mans motor race,
Right.
which is what it is named after. I'm a motor racing buff.
Yep.
So it's mulsanne.co.uk, Donal at Mulsanne, mulsanne.co.uk, or just look up Donal O'Neill on LinkedIn. There's probably two of us in Ireland that would have a high feature in LinkedIn. The other guy is a Gaelic football player. So if you see anything to do with Gaelic football, it's not me.
So you mean to say there's only a few Donal O'Neills that pop up on when you?
Well, there's a few, but there's only a few that pop up, high up, if you know what I mean. Prominent,
really?
yeah. Prominent.
Wow, what do you know?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I'd say the other guy is a great guy. He's big into Gaelic football. He started the Gaelic Football Players Union quite a few years ago, and has done a lot of work for the Gaelic football players. There's a couple of other guys, they're chemists and so on, but they're sort of regular people as opposed to nutters like me.
Right. Fantastic. Well, I'll make sure that I put all your details in the show notes. So everybody out there, if you want to get in touch with Donal, all the details will be in the notes of the podcast and also on YouTube.
Sure.
So you can contact him and be entertained for as long as you need, because it's been superb. So Donal, really appreciate you coming on the show. I've learned so much. It's been entertaining, but it's been incredibly informative, and hopefully people can really take a lot of great tips and trips and strategies for how to prepare their presentation, how to execute their presentation, how to think about performing, whether that be on Zoom or whether that be face-to-face, because, we're going to be living in this hybrid world for quite some time. So, it's just as important to deliver on the screen as you would in person as well. So thanks again for coming on the show, all the way from Ireland. Anything that you want to leave us with before we finish up?
Yeah, it's been really good fun. The one thing I would say is, if you're going to do a speech, just get out there and do it. Break that thing, that fear. Get out of your comfort zone. Do it, and then if you do fall on your face, you'll still be alive at the end of it.
That's right.
You don't die.
That's right.
You definitely don't die. But there are lots of things you can do to avoid, falling on your face. Yep. But get out there. It's if people laugh at you, at least they're laughing.
I love it. What a great place to finish. I'll leave it there. Donal, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And everybody out there, we'll see you very, very soon for another episode. Bye for now.